You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
Imagine this. Your primary identity provider goes down, whether it's a cloud outage, network issue, or even a cyber attack. Suddenly, your business grinds to a halt. But what if it didn't have to? Meet Identity Continuity from Strata, the game-changing solution that keeps your business running smoothly no matter what. Whether your cloud IDP crashes or your on-prem system faces a hiccup, Identity Continuity seamlessly shifts authentication to a secondary or even tertiary IDP, automatically and without disruption. Powered by the Mavericks Identity Orchestration Platform, Identity Continuity uses smart health checks to monitor your IDP's availability and instantly activates failover strategies tailored to your needs. When the coast is clear, it's a seamless switch back. No more downtime, no lost revenue, no frustrated customers. Just continuous, secure access to your critical applications every single time. Protect your business from the high costs of IDP outages. With Identity Continuity from Strata, downtime is a thing of the past. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to learn how Strata's Identity Continuity can provide seamless enhanced capabilities to your existing identity fabric and receive a free set of AirPods Pro.
When it comes to humans on orbit, LEO is getting crowded again. 3 Taikonauts have brought the number of occupants on the 2 active space stations right now to 13. And the number of astronauts and cosmonauts on the ISS, it's about the same as the number of Taikonauts on the Tiangong Space Station. It's no wonder that the Chinese are looking to expand their heavenly palace to accommodate more crew.
T-minus 20 seconds to LOS speed rest. Go for deploy. Roger roll.
Today is October 30th, 2024. I'm Maria Varmazes, and this is T-minus. China's Shenzhou 19 crew have arrived at the Tiangong Space Station. The DoD is reportedly increasing its P-LEO spend. Lockheed completes its Terran Orbital acquisition. And our guest today is Brian Whedon, Systems Director for the Center for Space Policy and Strategy at the Aerospace Corporation. And we're going to be discussing space regulation recommendations that rolled out of the Space Agenda 2025 report. Stay with us. It's Wednesday. Let's dive in. China has declared a complete success after launching the Shenzhou 19 crew to the Tiangong Space Station earlier today. The spacecraft has already docked with China's orbiting space station, bringing the crew number on board Tiangong to 6 people. The Shenzhou 19 crew have until early next week to perform handover procedures. The 3-person Shenzhou 18 crew then plan to depart Tiangong and return to Earth on November 3rd. According to Space News, the U.S. Department of Defense is reportedly raising its Proliferated Low Earth Orbit, or P-LEO, satellite-based services program from an initial $900 million ceiling to a projected $13 billion. The rise in funding shows how vital high-speed satellite internet has become for military operations. The United States is increasingly looking to buy in services from commercial partners to provide low Earth orbit satellite services. The DoD's P-LEO contract is also being expanded in anticipation of Amazon's Project Kuiper entering the LEO internet market in the coming years. Lockheed Martin has completed its acquisition of Terran Orbital, along with Terran Orbital's subsidiary, Tyvak International. The company will now be recognized as Terran Orbital, a Lockheed Martin company, and will remain a merchant supplier to the industry. And speaking of, Terran Orbital, a Lockheed Martin company, will maintain its locations in the U.S. states of Florida, California, Georgia, and Virginia, as well as in Italy. SpaceForge has signed a memorandum of understanding with Voyager Space. The agreement will see Voyager Space potentially using SpaceForge's ForgeStar platform, focused on in-space research and manufacturing, for advanced materials and biomedical applications. The collaboration will explore integrating Forgestar's flexible, returnable spacecraft with Voyager's orbital capabilities to create solutions for industries that rely on high-performance materials, from biomedical sectors to cloud computing. And this sets the stage for future projects, including developing next-gen return capability interfaces and collaborating on funding applications for commercial customers. Satellite operator Eutelsat has released its financial reports for their last quarter. Total revenues for the first quarter of their reporting cycle stood at 300 million euros, up 9.4% on a reported basis. Over 50% of Eutelsat's revenue comes from video connection services for broadcast media. And over to Australia now, and Spaceport Australia has signed an agreement with U.S. company Titan Space to explore potential locations in Australia for Titan Space's development, manufacturing, and launching of the company's spaceplanes and crafts. Titan Space says it's actively seeking suitable locations to expand its operations while developing its site in California. SES's global in-flight connectivity network has been selected by Thai Airways and Turkish Airlines to equip aircraft across their fleets with in-flight connectivity solutions. The airlines have selected SES's Open Orbits service, which launched earlier this year. Deorbit USA and Anuvu are partnering to study the design of an innovative, highly elliptical orbit network. The additional satellite capacity would be integrated into the Anuvu constellation to expand coverage and increase performance for Anuvu's worldwide mobility-focused customers, including commercial airlines. UNH, the University of New Hampshire, has been awarded $24.3 million by NASA on behalf of NOAA to build sensors for a high-priority alert system that will monitor the effects of space weather and the solar wind. UNH will monitor solar activity for potential interruptions to key technology like satellite communications, electric power grids, and GPS systems. For those keeping track at home, Blue Origin's New Glenn GS-1 rocket is inching ever closer to its first ever launch at Cape Canaveral. In the wee hours of the night, the GS-1 started its 23-mile journey to its pad, moving on its transporter named GERT, or Giant Enormous Rocket Truck. Hey, if the shoe fits. And have you ever parked in a spot that someone else needed and had to move? That's what's going on with Crew 9's Dragon capsule in space. The crew on the ISS are going to relocate the capsule to a different docking station in preparation for the arrival of the next resupply mission. NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Sonny Williams, and Butch Wilmore, as well as Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov, plan to undock the spacecraft from the forward-facing port of the station's Harmony module early on Sunday, and then redock to the module's space-facing port some 50 minutes later. This will be the fifth port relocation of a Dragon spacecraft with crew aboard, and NASA plans to live stream the event. Details about that live stream can be found by following the link in our show notes. And also added to today's selected reading links is an announcement from Maxar on a new leadership appointment and an announcement from Crosscut Ventures transitioning to space, defense, and energy investment. Hey T-Minus crew, if you find this podcast useful, please do us a favor and share a 5-star rating and short review in your favorite podcast app. It'll help other space professionals like you to find the show and join the T-Minus crew. Thank you for your support.
Around every entry point and every clever attacker, Vectra sees the attacks others can't. How? Vectra has AI on it. Vectra's AI attack signal intelligence tells security teams where to focus, what matters. It wades through thousands of individual threat events so you don't have to. Attackers infiltrating your network? Vectra has AI on it. Attackers compromising your identities? Vectra has AI on it. Vectra AI, the integrated signal powering your XDR. Visit vectra.ai/showme to learn more. That's vectra.ai/showme to learn more.
Last week, the Aerospace Corporation published their Space Report 2025, which outlines pressing issues to be addressed in the United States for the next incoming presidential administration. And our guest today is Brian Whedon, and he is the Systems Director at the Center for Space Policy and Strategy at the Aerospace Corporation, and he authored the chapter on space regulation. And I asked Brian about how he approached the report.
Commercial space activities in the private sector space in the U.S. is becoming ever more important. It's growing in terms of size, in terms of jobs, in terms of impact on the economy, and also what kind of capabilities are being delivered. And also in terms of how the U.S. government is looking at leveraging those commercial space capabilities for both civil purposes as well as national security purposes. And with that as sort of the background, how we provide oversight of that commercial space sector has a really big impact on its ability to grow, its ability to innovate, and how we make use of it, and whether or not it's even there to make use of. So we approach this topic within that context of saying, okay, yes, commercial is big, it's growing, it's important. How does the oversight, how does the regulation, to use a specific word, affect that? And how can we shape that regulation and reform it to enable that continued growth and innovation so that we can rely on commercial for all the great things and capabilities in the future?
Great. So how do we do that?
Well,
the $1 million question. Yeah. Okay, great. We're done.
one of the big things we do in the chapter is to do a quick recap of how this effort has been, or how this topic has been tackled by multiple administrations over the last 20 plus years. None of this is new. None of these problems are really all that new. They're very persistent problems, or what we call in the policy world, wicked problems that are really hard to solve. So we first wanted to start by providing that background of here's what was done by the Clinton administration, by the George W. Bush administration. Here's what was done by the Obama administration. Here's what was done by the Trump administration. Here's what was done by the Biden administration, and talk through the efforts that were done both in the executive branch as well as by Congress during those periods, what worked, what is still sort of an unresolved problem, and sort of lay all that out there. Because, in my opinion, it's very hard to say we should go do this without having a good grasp of what has been attempted and what that history is.
Yeah, no, I was looking at that graph actually in the PDF, and it's really interesting to sort of see. I mean, nobody can do everything at once. No administration can do everything at once, but it is interesting to see sort of how the emphases change per administration. It's really fascinating to see that graphically. I appreciate that. I just, as a bit of a nerd, I appreciate that. In almost every conversation I have with people, wherever they are in the space industry, the regulations come up, and it's sort of either the person is annoyed or they feel hopeless. We are very close to the national election. Presumably, something's going to change in some direction somehow after that election happens. Space is notoriously, famously bipartisan, though. If hopefully that will continue. The incoming administration, whoever they may be, what do we hope they will be focusing on, given the numerous priorities that need to be addressed? I mean, one cannot do everything, or maybe you can.
Yeah, and let me continue there. Which set some expectations here, right?
Yeah.
For all that those of us in the space world think this is the most important thing on the planet, it is, I would say, not by any reasonable sense at the top of anyone's overall national policy list, either from economics or from national security. There's many, many other issues that are being debated on. Most people notice probably that space hasn't even really come up in this election at all, right? Because it's just not a topic that is on most voters' minds, and it's not something that their politicians really think is going to swing voters. So first, let's just sort of keep that in the background. We talk about this and the importance of space, sort of keep that realism. We do think, however, that in the context of space, there are some important decisions that are going to be done, mainly because, as I sort of mentioned earlier, some of these decisions, we haven't made decisions, right? We've been talking about, we've been talking about a problem, we've been talking about an issue, we've been proposing one option or another, and in some cases it's been going on for 10 or 15 years. And so the issue is, how do we actually get to a decision? And that can be very difficult because there's lots of different constituencies within the administration itself. You have the challenges of the White House working with Congress, especially if they're being controlled by different parties. There's, of course, different constituencies outside the government, in the private sector. There's international and foreign policy concerns. All of that feeds back into why, again, we reiterate this is a wicked problem. This is not easy. We're not solving it because we're ignoring it. We're not solving some of these challenges because they are truly hard. And in many cases, there is no solving. There is just putting in a slightly better version that improves things, and then iterating that and improving over time. And often case wicked problem, that's the way you get to things.
Mitigation.
So,
absolutely.
Exactly. And so as an example, I'll talk a little about export controls, which is one of the areas that we talk about, which interestingly is not something that often comes up as a regulatory issue. But when you talk to companies and you look at sort of what they spend their time on and what they spend their legal fees on, it is a huge part of what they have to deal with. The long story short, in the late 1990s, there were some issues with technology transfers from U.S. commercial companies to China. As a result, Congress sort of moved everything related to space under the strictest export controls possible, what we call the U.S. munitions list and the International Technology, ITAR list, right? And required a legislative department. And it was that way for a long time. During the Obama administration, there was a huge multi-year effort to change that, and they succeeded in a couple of things. One, they got Congress to hand permission back to the executive branch to determine what technologies go on that state-controlled munitions list versus the commerce-controlled list that is slightly easier to get licenses on. That was a big deal. And then they went through a huge process of actually sorting through what goes either place, and they moved a bunch of commercial space things, particularly commercial communication satellites, over to the CCL, which reduced the requirements. But it certainly didn't end the issue, right? The Trump administration under Space Policy Directive 2 said they're going to look at this again, but there was not actually any decision. And just a couple of weeks ago, we got an announcement from the Biden administration that they are proposing a bunch of other changes of shifting technologies from one list to the other, and also waiving license requirements for certain close allies and partners. Now, none of that is all final. There's still some that needs to go through a process, but that just gives a little bit of flavor for the complexity of this and how long this issue sort of dates back in time.
Mm-hmm. One question that I can't help but ask, do we know if there's a definitive difference between a potential Trump administration or a potential Harris administration incoming in terms of space policy? Like, do we know one might do one or another? Is it just way too nuanced an issue to declaratively say one way or the other?
So we don't get into that in the chapter. And in fact, we're putting forward these recommendations regardless of who wins. I can say, looking backwards, there is, I would say, more bipartisanship or continuity over Republican Democratic administrations broadly than there is differences. I mentioned the export controls, right? That was an issue that both the Obama administration and the Trump administration worked on, and now the Biden administration worked on. Another example is remote sensing licensing reform. The Obama administration started something there. The Trump administration really made some massive changes there. And now under the Biden administration, they're working on implementation of that. Another good example is space traffic management. The Obama administration really started the first formal interagency process on that, but didn't reach a formal presidential decision. The Trump administration picked it up. They kept quite a bit of the prep work that had been done in terms of definitions and terms, but they made some tweaks to which agencies were going to be the lead for that. And then they published Space Policy Directive 3, which was the first U.S. Presidential policy on space traffic management. And now under the Biden administration, they have kept up implementation of that through the Office of Space Commerce and the Department of Commerce. They renamed, what it is from something called this orbital database of data to something called TRACK. So again, some tweaks at the margins, but the general thrust has been pretty much the same.
We'll be right back.
Quick question. Do your end users always work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? If the answer is no, then my next question is, how do you keep company data safe on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device, because it solves the problem traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at onepassword.com/XAM. That's onepassword.com/XAM.
Welcome back. When you become an American citizen, you get to vote. You've heard enough about that lately, I'm sure. And as a U.S. citizen, you will also occasionally get a little letter in the mail every few years, one that I know makes me just go, oh joy, as soon as I spot it. There's nothing like it. An official jury duty summons, yay! Selection for jury duty is done via a random lottery, but if you get picked and have very special extenuating circumstances or are over a certain advanced age, you can defer your service permanently, or at least a year. The list of ways you can excuse yourself varies by the state that you live in, but isn't it funny? As far as anyone can tell, being in orbit hasn't yet made it to the official list of reasons why you can't sit on a jury. Well, someone's going to need to add it on there, as apparently NASA astronaut Don Pettit has been summoned for jury duty. Little problem, though. He's currently on board the International Space Station. Don's son posted on X this message: "My family just got served 2 jury summons at once, and as if that wasn't absurd enough, one is for the one of us in space right now. Space, orbiting 17.5K miles per hour above our heads. What should I tell the judge? Wrong answers only." Being 250 miles away from doing your civic duty may be a very long car drive to the courthouse, but it's a lot more complicated when you are that distance up. That's it for T-Minus for October 30th, 2024, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. You can email us at space@n2k.com or submit the survey in the show notes. Your feedback ensures we deliver the information that keeps you a step ahead in the rapidly changing space industry. N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. This episode was produced by Alice Carruth. Our associate producer is Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Ivan. Our executive editor is Brandon Karpf. Simone Petrella is our president. Peter Kilpie is our publisher. And I am your host, Maria Varmazes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.
And now, a word from our sponsor, NordPass. NordPass is an advanced password manager from the team behind NordVPN, designed to help keep your business safe from data leaks and cyber threats. It gives your IT professionals control over who has access to your company's data and makes it easy for everyone else on your team to use strong passwords. Right now, you can go to www.nordpass.com/cyberwire for 35% off the NordPass Business Yearly Plan. Don't miss out on that.